You're very welcome to the Woman to Woman show here on Competent Women Ireland's YouTube channel with me, Roisin Leclerc. Competent Women Ireland is all about supporting Irish women and all women, especially women who support women, speak up for women, and be the voice of women, even when the odds are all stacked up against them, and in the face of adversity. Women who support women in every sense of the word, without the political, corporate, societal, and cultural word salad of fake feminism. Let's not be delusional. We still live in a man's world run by men for men. My guest for this video is a true Celtic warrior in every sense of the word, woman of honour, who represents her country with honour, dignity, and integrity. Karina Molloy. Karina created his Irish history as a young woman in 1981 who fulfilled her dream of entering the Irish Defence Forces. A platoon of 38 women, a platoon that broke all barriers and paved the way for all women now serving in the Defence Forces. Katrina is one of Ireland's women of honour who courageously and bravely stood up and spoke up about the sexual assaults and sexism within our Irish military. A true woman of honour. Karina Molloy, it is a great honour and privilege to welcome you to Competent Women Ireland's YouTube channel.
Wow, thanks, Roisin, for that introduction. I hope I can live up to that accolade.
You have lived up to it in your career, in your 31-year career. You have lived up to it in being a woman of true honour, standing up for women and being the voice for women. A true modern day hero here in Ireland. And I don't say that with the plamasse word salad that is used a lot. You have written an amazing book, which we're going to talk about. And
Great, yeah.
I laughed and I cried. And I was upset, I was disillusioned, and I had all the mixed emotions as a woman and as a mother of a son in the Defence Forces. And I just, wow, you've made history in 1981. You have an exceedingly distinguished career as a woman within our Irish Defence Forces, within Irish military. And would I say I was shocked? No. When I read the things that you wrote that went on, and I would say that you left an awful lot out from being a woman. Yeah. And I was, how many women are in awe of you? And I don't say that, as I said, with such plamasse, as we say in here in Ireland. I'll leave the description to plamasse in the description box. But wow, the brave, courageous, determined, motivated, inspired woman. And many times you inspired yourself and motivated yourself to succeed. Tell us about, let's talk about your dream of becoming a member of our Defence Forces, a woman who swore an oath to protect our nation and defend our citizens. Tell us about, you grew up in Donegal.
Yes, I grew up in Donegal, and on reflection, I'm looking back, I came actually from quite a military family, because so the military blood was in our DNA, because my both grandfathers were in two armies, Irish Army and British Army, and an uncle was in the Royal Navy, and I had a cousin who served 3 tours in Northern Ireland as bomb explosive ordnance officer. And then my brother inspired me. He joined the Irish Army 3 years before I joined, and then went off after 4 years service, went off to the French Foreign Legion. Right. So it was no, I guess it wasn't any surprise for me to look for that kind of adventure as well, and to follow suit, to join the military. But of course, my mother had other ideas, and she tried to push me to become a nurse. Every Irish mother wants a nurse and a priest and a nun in her family. She certainly wasn't going to get me to be a nun, but she tried very hard to get me to be a nurse. But I was having none of it. Well, it's not that I was having none of it. I did actually apply several times, but I just wasn't successful. But after applying for the Defence Forces and a few little hiccups, I eventually was successful to become one of the first 38 females in the whole of Ireland out of 40,000 that, not 40, no, 4 out of 4,000 that applied. There was 40 places. So, and that was whittled down to 38. So the 38 of us joined as innocent as anything and not really realizing, writing the book and reflecting. I don't think we realized, what we stepped into, and the fact that we were pathfinders. We were all just trying to survive from day one of our training, and we had little thought of the 40 or 50 next girls that would come in 6 months' time, which we thought, and looking down the road, I don't think any of us joined with the accolade that, oh, we're the pathfinders. We weren't. We were all very innocent. So
and innocence in the fact too that, tell us about, we'll talk about the briefly, because I think this is very important, about the recruit training, because I was just really like, I went, oh my God, when the PE gear, I mean, the frilly knickers, I mean, my God, what man, or what, surely men where did common sense go out, even in the uniforms?
yeah.
Uniforms, because like I'm sure the British Army with the British Army had plenty of experience with female military and the US military with uniforms. So was it just a lack of thought or planning, or what was it?
As I wrote in the book, I really don't know where. It certainly was a male civil servant that ticked that box and ordered those frilly tennis knickers in the old days in the 80s. You'd see the professional tennis players wearing frilly knickers, short white skirt and short and white t-shirt. A bit of background, actually. One of the girls that actually joined the army with me, she was telling me that she actually worked in that factory that filled that order.
Wow.
For the shirts. But at that stage, she had applied, but she didn't realize that she, in 2 months, 2 months later, she'd actually be wearing those frilly knickers.
Really?
So that was, yeah. I don't know where their head was, and how our female officers allowed us to run around in the barracks for the first, thankfully, only for the first 10 days, because it was hugely humiliating and embarrassing and sexist. But thankfully, the 38 of us were quite a powerful, loud, forceful group. And I'm sure our platoon sergeant was a bit shocked, and we just came out one morning and decided, no, we're not wearing them. And as I said in my interviews and the book, we all went down to Dunnes Stores and bought our tracksuits.
Yeah.
Because what we should have bought, well, of course, all the men were running around shorts and t-shirts. And I know the British Army, the American Army, the Canadian Army, they all allowed their women to wear shorts and t-shirts also.
Yeah.
So I don't know where the frilly knickers came from, but we got rid of them very quickly, and we bought our tracksuits and made ourselves a little more comfortable in our PT training. So, but the rest of the uniforms were fine. The rest of they were fine.
Apart from the boots you were wearing, the boots. Yeah, because you're wearing the men's boots, which are completely different from women's feet. Men's feet are different from women's feet.
Yeah. Eventually, in 18 months, they changed that as well, which was good. But in the meantime, we still had to suffer, because, as you say, the men's feet are much wider than the women's feet. And some of our girls, gosh, they were tiny. We had 3 girls that were only 4'10". So you can imagine they're tiny little feet. So they suffered more than they needed to suffer during the training. But again, we're such a resilient group. We just put our heads down. We got on with all the little annoyances that we had to put up with that we thought that we shouldn't have had to put up with.
Yeah.
They should have done their research. They should have got ready. But it was obvious that they weren't ready. They just weren't ready for us.
Because it wasn't going, the platoon wasn't going to go ahead, was it?
No,
it was going to be cancelled, wasn't it? It was going to be postponed or stopped. But then someone recruited another girls beforehand, so then the platoon had to then go ahead. I forgot about that. You just reminded me of that.
A very smart move by the gentleman in the Western Command to bring his girls in. I think they got in 5 days before the rest of us. Right. So that was a very, very clever move. Smart. Otherwise, God knows how long we would have waited to get women in the Irish Defence Force.
Yeah.
So it was a good move.
And Karina, your recruit training was different to the men because it was non-combatant training, wasn't it? You weren't allowed. You were more. Did they recruit you more for maybe PR and offers but not as a full combatant soldier?
Yeah. But what the public probably don't realise, because over 40, almost 42 years ago now, when the first female joined, the advertisement in the newspapers, because there was no internet then, but the advertisement in the newspapers was join the Women's Service Corps. Like the British Army had a Women's Service Corps. It wasn't join the Irish Army, it was join the Women's Service Corps. So we were to be a completely different identity and a different corps altogether. So and then it said we become telephonists, administrators. I think they allowed us to be drivers and and grooms in the equitation school. So they envisaged that the woman would come in and take over the offices and allow the men to go out and do the macho military stuff. And so that was the rumours that went around the barracks before we even joined. So that, of course, put the backs up of all the men before we even got in through the gates, that they're going to be kicked out of their office jobs. And so because they worked really hard for that privilege. But within 6 weeks of our training, we were all brought into a big lecture hall one afternoon and told that the government has now decided to disband the Women's Service Corps. And so we knew no different. So we were only, in the army 6 weeks and we didn't know any different. So we were offered, you can either stay or go, but if you decide to stay, then you are now integrated with the rest of the at that time there was at least 13,500 men. So you're now competing against the men and you don't have privilege of being in your corps, because I think they realized we stayed in our corps. We, as recruits, would have gone up the ranks very, very quickly, because we would have had to become NCOs very quickly to train the next batch of female recruits that came in. And the female officers that were at that time second lieutenants, first lieutenants, they would have made captains and commandants very, very quickly. And soon, within 10 years, there would have been a female general.
Wow.
And I guess the forward thinking of the men, that didn't go down too well, because it took nearly 30 years for a female general. Whereas if we'd stayed in our corps, our previous opinion reasoning is that's why they disbanded the corps, the Women's Service Corps. But anyway, we'll never know why they disbanded. They didn't tell us. They didn't have to tell us. They just gave us the option to leave or stay within 6 weeks of our training. Yeah.
So then you're passing out. There's a beautiful photograph there of you with your mom and dad.
Yes.
Then there's, on the next page, there's one with the passing out parade.
Yeah.
The passing out parade is a very proud day, not just for the parents, but wow, for you to be a fully trained soldier as a 2-star private. Then you had to go on and do another, is it 12 weeks or 3 weeks course? The recruit training is 12 weeks, isn't that right?
Yeah, in the Irish Army, it's 14 weeks. And then technically what's supposed to happen, you pass out as a 2-star course, and then you go to your unit for a few months, and then you're brought back then for another 6 weeks to 8 weeks training to become a 3-star. But that didn't. We were very special. That didn't happen to us. I wouldn't say call us special, but they quickly realized that they wanted us. Basically, they condensed our training to allow us to pass out as 3 stars. So they just extended our 14-week training to 16 weeks, added another 2 weeks on. But normally a 3-star course at that time was 6 weeks. And it's very combatant and tactical training, and you're on the ground and you do a lot of hill walking, a lot of tactics on the ground, and you stay overnight in the mountains, in the woods for tactical training. But unfortunately, and if you read the book, I was very, very annoyed that our 3-star course was condensed into 2 weeks, brought into a lecture hall to the School of Admin, learning how to type, learning how to address envelopes, learning there's a book called in every office in the army called the in-out book, where you have to physically open an envelope, write down what that letter is about, put it into the inbox, and inside on a big ledger. And then if you post a letter out, then you have to, on the outside of the in-out book is called, and you learn how to write, we sent an answer, because this is way before the internet, way before emails. Everything had to be physically written. So we were taught how to do that for 2 weeks. And
no Glen of the Mile training up in the Glen of the Mile, or nothing.
No, nothing. And looking back then, when we were all sent to our own units, and a year later, some girls got on the NCO's course, which is to become from a private to an NCO. That's 5.5 months fully combatant course. There was no favors done to us to not allow us to experience the Glen of the Mile or an overnight before, during crew training, because we got an awful shock when we went on our NCO's course, and we weren't prepared, which really wasn't fair. But you
stuck it out. You were determined. I really loved reading about that determination, that willpower, that you were going to stick it out, even though there was an awful lot of misogyny and sexism and everything there. Your sheer determination, you wouldn't falter in that determination that you were going to pass out. Well, I don't know you were going to finish the NCO course.
I think that came from, it certainly didn't come from the army during training. It came really from my DNA and from my background.
Yeah.
In my childhood, my father and my mother raised me, saying, well, if you're going to do a job, you do it at 110%. And there was such a thing as failure in my childhood. No. We weren't allowed to fail at anything. If you take up something, then you do it 110%. So absolutely. At that, I mean, the army was my career then. I was so passionate about the army, and you will not advance in your army career, as you know, being a mother of a soldier, that if you don't pass an NCO's course, then you stay a private the rest of your life. And that's not what I joined the Defence Force for. I joined to go up the ranks, not as quickly as possible, but to go up the ranks as high as I can, and and it wasn't even to show the way for other females. I wasn't even thinking about that. When I was writing the book on reflection, I wasn't pushing for the accolade to be, the first female to do this or the first female to do that. I just wanted basically to increase my salary, to increase my wages. I was a single woman. I wanted to buy a house. I wanted a mortgage. I wanted to, to improve my life. And the only way to do it in the army is to get promoted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like any job. You didn't go into the army going, we're the first 38 in the Irish Defence Force, we're making history. You went in because it was a profession. It was a career. Yeah. And it was something that you were all really determined to do and succeed. And that in itself was, and the determination it took for you and the women of the 38 women to do that, that is definitely comes from the Irish DNA, the Celtic warrior, and coming from Donegal, that spirit of Donegal, and as a Derry woman, I know the Donegal, the Ulster woman.
And the stubbornness, a bit of stubbornness thrown in.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have that. Yeah.
We have it.
We have it. And so the challenges of the NCO course were huge. And even, even the rifles, because you didn't you weren't taught, if my memory serves me right, excuse me, the armory. You didn't, even putting in the guns correctly, and
Yeah.
going around with training, and having the guns. And then, now, I sometimes still think, oh my God, does my son really have a real gun? And he looks at me, Mommy, I'm a soldier. But even
Yeah.
that, for women in your recruit training, you didn't learn how to shoot or armory.
Oh no, no, we did learn to shoot. All right, I'll correct you there. Yeah, we did learn to shoot,
You learned to
but
shoot.
yeah, yeah, we were trained at the same as the men in weapons with for at that time it was the FN and the GPMG, which is a light machine gun. But what happened then was when we went back to our units, because we were non-combatant, we didn't touch a weapon again until the
Oh,
following year when we did our annual range practice.
yeah,
Whereas the men did what's known as duties, as I'm sure you know from your son. They did 24-hour duties,
yeah,
at least every 8 to 10 days. So they were handling the weapons at least every 7 days. Whereas we went back to our units and we wouldn't handle a weapon for another year until we would go on and we'd have every soldier has to do annual range practice. So they go and fire the rifle every year.
yeah,
And that's where we fell down on. Well, I personally, I don't know how the other girls got on, but that's where I felt I fell down very badly on my NCO's course because I didn't get on my NCO's course until my almost third year in the Defence Forces because I had other ambitions. I did my PTI's course
yeah,
first. That was my first love to get that done. And then I concentrated on getting promoted. So I hadn't touched a weapon. I'd only touched a weapon in 3 years. I touched a weapon twice out of the 3 years. Yeah, because I'd only been on the range twice, and once a year. So when the NCO's course came up, because of the type of unit I belonged to, I was only in an admin unit. I didn't get any. We normally the infantry units get at least 2 weeks training prior to going on a prelim course. But because I belong to an admin group, we got 1 day of training to revise the weapons. We got 1 day of training before we went on what's known as a preliminary course to getting on the NCO's course. So it's a pre-course to whittle out the people that aren't up to scratch to
yeah,
get on the full NCO's course. So I had to pass that first. And then thankfully I passed that. And then myself and another girl, we started the NCO's course. And then unfortunately she left after a week.
yeah,
And suddenly I realized, I came in the following Monday and realized, shit, I'm the only woman among 55 men. I have a long way to go. And I said, right, let's just put the head down here and get on with it. Whatever happens, just get on with it. But I just wasn't. I was expecting a lot of hurt and pain physically, but the I wasn't expecting the mental attitude and the mental pain that they did throw at me
yeah.
as well, being the only woman. But we got there
You
in the
did.
end.
You got there with pure Donegal spirit
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
your family spirit. And then, after that, then you were the first woman, am I correct in saying that, to actually apply for the Army Ranger Wing?
Yes. I
And
don't
you
know what.
kept applying, and then and they must have said, she's applied again.
Yeah, yeah.
I
You know
loved
what,
that part.
what happened there was, as I said before, during my childhood, you're taught. I was taught, to be the best. Whatever you're going to do, try and be the best. There's always going to be someone better, faster, stronger than you on the
Always.
basketball court or the athletic court, but you try your best. So when I joined the army and after getting back to my unit in Collins Barracks in Dublin, I looked around. Of course, the best for my father, of course, was, well, you must become an officer. You must become an officer. But as I looked around and looked at the female officers at that time, I said, do I really want to stay stuck behind a desk? And so to me, the best that the Irish Army had to offer at that time, and still is the best, it was the Army Range Wings. unit. They're the armed. They're basically, for any civilian listening, is basically they're our equivalent of the SAS in the British Army. Everyone knows who and what the SAS are. So so the Army Ranger Wing. So I applied twice before I joined the NCO's course. I just applied, and of course, being non-combatant, of course, my first application went into file 13, which is the bin. Second application got as far as the director of training, but again got put in the bin. And then the third time I applied was thankfully after my NCO's course, and I was qualified corporal, and I applied, but really not thinking that I would get it. And for the first two times I applied, I trained really, really hard and really, pumped up my fitness. And but the third time I applied, I just, as I said, I just threw it in there to annoy them, just to see, to annoy them. Molloy is at it again. But unfortunately, I got accepted, and yeah, there was a very steep learning curve. But yeah, well, my only accolade, I mean, of course, yes, I applied, but of course I have to, I failed. And but my only claim to fame is that 22 men left before me.
Mm-hmm.
And then the afternoon that I did leave, I was no sooner out the gate on the fifth day that 10 men left within 40 minutes after me. Their ego wouldn't allow them to leave before me. But it was just mentally, I was flying it. I loved it. Mentally, they weren't going to break me, but unfortunately, physically, no, I wasn't ready. Just
And
my
I think, Karina, I stand to be corrected this. I don't think there's any female to date that is a member of the Army Ranger Wing. I stand corrected on that.
No, you are correct there.
Am I
yes.
correct on that?
Yeah. One girl did attempt it 3-4 years after me, because we served overseas together, and I was telling her all about it, and she was very keen, and I was being very enthusiastic and very supportive. Yeah, off you go. And but unfortunately she left after the second day because she got badly injured. And then I think it was maybe 18 years later, I think 2 or 3 girls have since tried it, attempted, but none of them have made it yet. But one girl eventually, or hopefully two women will eventually get there, because in all the other armies all over the world, the females are now passing these courses. Yeah.
And you also, it was unfortunate, really, that you then had a conversation with an Army Ranger Wing trainer, and he said that you exceeded all expectations during your training, and you were on your way to making Irish history again. If he only had told you that, would you have kept going?
Yeah, because I would have kept going if I realized I was doing this, because the guy that I talked to for research for the book, for verification of the selection course, he was actually the sergeant that was actually in charge of my course. So and my partner, who's a retired ranger, he arranged for the interview. Took a long time to get it together, but I sat down with DH, and we had a long conversation, and I went away from that interview, saddened but heartened, because as he said, if you didn't realize how well you were doing mentally, women are very, very strong. We're really strong. We are so strong. We can put up with nonsense being thrown at us, whereas the men just got so angry so quickly around me, and they were thrown off. But mentally, I was, as I said, flying it, but physically I just couldn't do it. But if I had known that I was doing so well in the course, then I would have stuck it out, because the the schedule at that time for the selection course was you go in on a Sunday, and if you make it to the Saturday afternoon, you're allowed to leave for Saturday afternoon, and then you're back in on Sunday evening at 6 o'clock. So in my head, I just kept going. I had to leave, I think, on a Thursday morning. Oh, just make it Saturday, I'll get home, have a shower, have a bath, have a good night's sleep, good food, and then I'll come back on Sunday. But I won't spoil it as to what
No,
was it an excuse? No, well, maybe. But anyway, I didn't make it. I left on Thursday afternoon. But if I had known, you see, they never tell you how well you're doing
no,
on books. No.
no.
But if I had got the slightest inkling that, oh, you're doing well, Molloy, keep going, by a DS, then I would have stuck it out to Saturday. But I didn't.
You talk about how women are mentally strong,
Yes.
may not have the physical strength, and that's down to our genes and the structure, and the difference between men and women is our physicality. You served 31 years within our Irish Defence Forces. You served it with dignity and honour and integrity. And you lived so many lived experiences of sexism and really sexual assaults within the Defence Forces. And I know an awful lot of people say to you, oh, but why did you stick it out? I understand why you stuck it out. It was your job.
Yeah.
And why should you leave when so many other, and it's like everything in Ireland, men are never reprimanded. They can do, there's a lot of things men do in life with impunity. And women are just saying, be quiet, stay in your box, and say nothing and get on with it. You were so courageous and brave, not just in your professional career, but also as a woman within the Defence Forces. Tell us about that.
A lot of people have questioned me as to why I stayed. And actually one guy is very emphatic in saying, that I was a disgrace to my uniform for writing the book because I had such an exemplary career. And how
What?
dare I write a book by complaining? Yeah. But
Wow.
but I didn't, as far as I don't think I wrote a book about complaints. I think I wrote a book about my experiences.
Yes.
And yes, I think there's a lot of humor in the book. There's a lot of people have said very sad, they felt sorry for me, but the main thing is, why did you stay? Why did you stay? Why did you stay? Well, number one, it was my career, and I was extremely passionate about it. And why shouldn't I stay? Women have the right to advance the same as the men. And we had female officers advancing, showing us the way. As one famous female officer says, if you can be, if you can be it, if you can see it, you can become it.
Yes.
That's her catchphrase. My catchphrase is, if you don't stay in the room, then you can't change the room. So how was I going to change things or make anything better for anybody, any other woman or man coming behind me, if I don't stay and fight the inequalities and the misogyny and the stigma that that they seem to think the woman shouldn't be there, that they have no place in the Defence Forces. Of course, we have places in the Defence Forces. We excel in medics, we excel in communications, we excel at driving. Yes, okay, we don't excel in the 100% grunt front out on the ground, but we have other experiences there and other qualifications, and we excel in other areas. Because the modern warfare now is not on the battlefield; it's in communications, and and unfortunately warfare is now by pressing a button and flying drones and dropping bombs indiscriminately from 20,000 miles away. So women are quite capable of doing that.
Definitely.
So yes, I stayed in the room to change the room, and that's the reason why I stayed. Also, let's not be coy about it, but I mean, I had a mortgage to pay. I was a single woman. I never got married. My parents couldn't help me out, and so I had to stay to get a wage and pay my mortgage and get a life, and see and travel, and just basically get on with living, and that's why I stayed. And I enjoyed it. I really did. Even though really nasty things happened, but I still enjoyed it. I had a great career. I don't think that I was disgraced to my uniform by red.
Leaving the army was not an option. And you know, why should you have left the army with
Yeah,
the misogyny, the comments, even like, you know, even the comments that were really demeaning, wanting you to leave and encouraging you to leave, and even the comments from men. Let's talk about Captain X. Because
right.
I know you've spoken about him on television and radio, but give our viewers a brief. The sexual harassment that you experienced all through your career just shows the testament of what a strong Irish spirited Donegal woman you are, and the determination. Why should a woman leave? Because think that they can get away with speaking and treating and behaving with women in such a
Yeah.
disgraceful manner. You've really paved the way for the younger people, younger women in the Irish Defence Forces, but I'm also going to say the men as well.
Yes. 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 I mean, I belong to that group called the Women, but we also are including men in that, because okay, initially we were all about the sexual harassment and abuse against women, but we've been educated, and of course I knew. I mean, I saw the abuse of my fellow male privates during my NCO's course. One in particular I speak about in the book, and he was, as what we would call, a heat seeker, because of his academic demeanour, and the fact that he spoke with a Scottish accent. And so men are abused as well in
Yeah,
the defence force if you
they
don't
are.
live up to the macho image that they want you to be. But as far as Officer X is concerned, he was just creme de la creme of my abuse, because it just lasted and lasted and continued. I met him just before I was due to go on an overseas mission, and he was to be my boss on this mission. And we do what's known as a forming up period, was in Ireland, normally in the Curragh camp, sometimes in other barracks, but in this particular case, is in the Curragh camp. And he introduced himself, and we shook hands and said, "Oh, yeah," because I was to be his corporal clerk. And I had a male sergeant with me in the office, and a female, and a male private. And he just started off immediately saying, "Wow, you're a wonderful looking woman, and you remind me of your mistress, of my mistress, of my
Not even his
mistress."
wife, his
Not
mistress.
even his wife. Yeah, not even his wife. So, and he just started by saying, "Oh, we're going to have fun throughout our 6 months. I'm going to really love looking at you during in the office for the next 6 months." So this unfortunately continued. The comments, the inappropriate touching, So after 2 months, I'd had enough. I mentioned it to my sergeant, because you have to go through the chain of command, and he wasn't in any way helpful whatsoever. So the army has this wonderful, strange system that you must go through the chain of command. So I went through my sergeant, and then the next step was then to go through my boss. But it was my boss that was harassing me. But I still had to write a written application to go in and have a private interview with him, to sit down and tell him to stop doing what he's doing. So I left that interview feeling that, maybe I'm being oversensitive, because he just turned it on me and said, "Oh, okay, Molloy, I won't give you any more compliments, and I won't say how good looking you are today, or we won't be having any more banter, and that's fine, no problem." So,
Banter.
banter, yeah, that would love the word banter. So so left, and in fairness to him, for about 2 weeks he stopped, and we sort of had polite conversations, and because you couldn't but have a conversation, because we were in the same office. But then the harassment started again. So then I decided to go higher, because I'd gone through the chain of command initially. I got then to see my what's called an adjutant, and I went to my adjutant 3 more times to complain, but he wasn't doing anything about it, because his attitude was, "No, we won't be doing anything about this, because this guy's," well, he was older, more senior in service, and he had an exemplary record, and we won't be destroying his career. And Molloy, just get on with it. So, so then at the end of that 6 months, it ended up with that Officer X breaking in, not breaking, but I opened the door because it was after 12 o'clock at night. He banged on the door, roared on the door. This was a military camp. I wasn't. You just get up and you open the door.
Yeah.
And he was very drunk and pushed me onto the bed. And luckily, he was so drunk that I got him off the bed, and I ran out the door to get help and ran to my sergeant and my private that I worked with in the stores and asked them to come and remove Officer X from my room because he was very drunk and he had just sexually assaulted me, and I need him out of my room. So, and then when I complained about that the following morning, I was just told to get on the plane and forget about it, because we were due to leave in 5 days' time.
And we'll come back to that in a moment, but just while I have it in my head, you also, the report back, when you come back, when you go overseas, and the report is so important, isn't it? The report back on your overseas trip is so important and so valuable to a soldier, that it's really important to get that positive report so you can get on more overseas trips and for your career. And that is why too, it's like, just get on the plane, but you're in that sort of position. You're going to get on the plane, you need that report back, but there again, how long is this going to keep going on?
Yes, that's very true. What you're talking about is your personal evaluation of how you did your job during that 6 months. So going back as time, my first overseas trip, I got the worst overseas report ever in my entire career, because I was called introvert and I didn't socialize day to day. So yeah, in that evaluation report, there's 3 boxes. There's to tick. There, one box is called unsuitable. You're not suitable for overseas. And the second box is suitable but with reservations. And then the third box is totally suitable to go overseas again. So in my first mission, he had ticked the box unsuitable for overseas, never to get overseas again, because I totally withdrew because of what happened to me on that very first mission. I totally withdrew for the last 4 months because of what happened. So therefore, I didn't socialize. I wasn't a happy going around smiling and jolly person that they wanted me to be. And so he ticked the unsuitable box. But thankfully, someone obviously told him, well, tick the suitable with the reservations. So every man and every woman that has a problem overseas with their mission overseas, if they really push a complaint, then you have to weigh up, is it worth it? You have to pick your battles to win the war, and is it worth receiving that box to be ticked to be found unsuitable for overseas? Because that's the only thing that kept me in the Irish Defence Forces, was my ability to go overseas and get away from the misogyny and the systemic abuse that I got in Ireland. But sometimes only to go from the frying pan into the fire overseas. But you have to weigh up, and that's why I probably didn't push it, because I really wanted to get overseas again and again and again. So there's always a carrot there, and you're always thinking, saying, oh, will I push this or will I not? And you always have to think 3 steps ahead and think of the consequences.
Yeah. So
is it really worth pushing? And for me, I was just happy to get on that plane and get away from that man.
And even coming back and seeing him again a couple of years later, that you saw him again, and then there was a lot more incidents in the book where your room was let's say people just entered banged on your door, entered your room, and there was another one, even with a female colleague. You were sharing
Yeah,
your room, had to help you get this man off you,
yeah,
this young captain or young officer off you. And also, what I noticed was very, very, really unfair is that your living quarters were always at the other side of the camp, away from the showers and away from all the other Irish contingents. So I'm going, surely that in itself is deliberate. Why do they not just put you, why put you where you had to walk across the camp to go to the toilet and go to the shower?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the best and most hurt, annoying and frustrating example of that is when I served in Chad.
Yeah.
And yeah, and where my billet was literally 3 minutes walk away from the men's billet, which was great. And it was 3 minutes away from their it's called ablutions, their washroom, their shower. There was no urinal. It was you enter a little hut, and to your left was the shower with the
You've gone on mute. You've gone on mute. Yeah,
just
we got it there.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
So you so that was only 3 minutes away from me, but it was the men's showers and men's toilet. But yet it had a lock on the door. Whereas my female showers, because I actually ended up being the only female in the camp through no fault of my own yet again. But my female showers and toilets was at least a 10-minute walk through the camp to the far end of the camp. And that camp was full of over 700 men, all living in tents. So at 4 o'clock in the morning, I had to go to the toilet at 4 o'clock in the morning, like a lot of people do. I would have to get up, put on my boots, dressing gown, and walk, as I called it in the book, walk the gauntlet of all of these men, because these were soldiers from certain countries that just don't sleep. And because they don't drink, they sit outside their tents and they smoke, and they smoke the cigarettes and they have tea, and they sit and chat, you know. And as innocent as anything, as innocent as it sounds, it's still very, very threatening for me as a single woman, as the only woman in camp, to walk through them and past them at 4 o'clock in the morning. I was not allowed to walk the 3 minutes to the men's toilets that had a lock on the door, to use that toilet at 4 o'clock in the morning, to run across with my dressing gown, sit on the toilet, close the door, pee, come back, and be back safely within 2 minutes into my own billet. No, I was not allowed because it was the men's toilets. So, and that was in 2010. 2010. Yeah, yeah. There was over 500 women in the army at that stage, and we were fully combatant. We were treated well, obviously not treated with respect, because I was a senior NCO at 15 years by the time I served overseas in Chad. It was my last mission, but there was still no respect, and I just wasn't allowed to use the toilet.
Yeah.
It was just unbelievable.
When you
I
think
wouldn't
that,
mind if
yeah,
if they had a line of urinals. Yeah, fair enough. But they didn't. They had one toilet, could lock the door, close the door. Made no sense, and it really infuriated me. It's very, very.
it would infuriate any woman. And they were all had wives, they all had daughters, aunts and grannies. Surely
Yeah,
would they want their wife, their daughter, or their niece to be treated in that disrespectful way?
yeah,
There's no
yeah.
logic. There's no logic in the planning or the structure. There was nothing like that. Um, tell us about Bosnia. Uh, a gentleman who you were with there was an episode with in Bosnia at Christmas time. He apologized to you for the way you were treated at one stage, but then he made a pass at you as well. And then he said, at Christmas time in the Irish house, he apologized to me. I'm really sorry, he said, but you're a lovely woman behind it all. You don't deserve
Oh,
your reputation. And I go,
yeah,
What reputation? This woman is amazing. It's funny how they put out any woman who's strong, determined. They classify you as a difficult woman just because
Yes.
you're mentally strong.
Yeah, yeah. The lovely word that they used in one discussion about me that I was told about afterwards was Molloy is problematic. Yeah, yeah. Because I stand up for things.
Yeah.
That incident was yeah. There's a very strange system in the Irish Defence Forces for selection for overseas. It's called, you know, the longest back. If you're the longest back in country, back in Ireland,
Yes.
then you're eligible for first selection to go overseas again. So I applied for that trip to Bosnia, and another fellow, you know, CQ also applied, but he was back longer from his previous mission than I was. Uh, there was only 2 weeks in the difference, but he was back longer, so he got the selection, and that was fine. I just made, and the reason why he tackled me was because I did make the phone call to verify, you know, was he longer back than me because of my history of being
Yeah.
discriminated against. I made that phone call, and I was told officially, yes, he is back longer than you. And I said, okay, that's fine. I have no complaints about that. I'm not complaining about that. That's fine. I'll get it. You know, and the officer that I was talking to said, yeah, nothing I can do, Karina. He's back longer than you. Better luck next time.
Yeah.
So I said, great, yeah, thanks very much. And I put down the phone. I never said a word to anyone. I never complained. Nothing. But and then a wonderful thing happened, and 3 weeks later I got out to that mission in a different position. But because he heard the Army's terrible for hearing through the grapevine that I complained and demanded his job, which I didn't, he tackled me and said, how dare you complain, and how dare you look for my job? And there was a terrible, terrible row face to face. But I stood my ground, and I said, once again, the rumor machine has twisted everything. And I will admit that here's exactly what happened. And that's why he came back and apologized at Christmas, because he realized that, yes, my reputation precedes me and the rumor machine, and they just twist everything. And yes, but we became good friends after that.
We
That's
did.
fine.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
There
yeah.
are some funny stories in the book, and there's one that I just burst out laughing. There's many of them. There's many of them. But
I
there was
wonder which
also some
one.
good guys. There was also some good guys and
Oh, yeah.
good guys in the defense forces. And one of the ones I laughed was you was you were in the, is it the stores where you have to drive, or correct me, but you had no driving license anyway, and you must be the first woman or the first not must be the first time that, and maybe the only time, that an officer drove around someone of a lesser rank, let's say. And
Yes,
I thought that was really funny that the officer was driving you around and a woman around.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah. That was very embarrassing. For some reason, on that mission, all of my missions, I did 11 missions, but I'd, on the all 10 missions for me were in my core, in the logistics core, which I was very familiar with, and wasn't out of my comfort zone. But on this particular mission, strangely, I was sent in an admin position, which is pure admin. And in that particular mission, I was the pay clerk. And in the pay clerk in Lebanon, you have to drive to the bank. The bank is in a village in Lebanon called Tyre. But nobody, once I got selected and I accepted the selection, nobody actually told me that, oh, as a pay clerk, you have to drive. But no one actually asked. And I never paid attention to pay clerks when I was overseas previously. So I learned to drive very, very late in life, because I cycled everywhere in Dublin. I lived in Dublin, cycled everywhere, so I didn't need a bike. I'd hop on a bus to go home. So I never learned to drive until I was over 30. So and the morning that we had to go and collect the pay, the afternoon before, the officer told me the pay, the commandant said, okay, Karina, we need a car tomorrow morning outside the office at 9 o'clock. And see you then. We'll go. I said, yeah, that's fine. I can organize the car, sir. That's no problem. But I can't get it to the office. He says, what do you mean you can't get it to the office? I said, I can't drive. He said, are you joking? And I said, no. I said, no one told me I had to drive for this position. But the funny thing was he accepted. But the funny thing was, um, 5.5 months later, that particular position that he was in, he stayed for a year. It was a year's mission for him. For me, it was 6 months. So he was in his second 6 months when I arrived for that 6 months. So I got back out again 6 months later, and he was still there. He was handing over. He'd only 2 weeks left to do. But suddenly he's seen me drive a little truck into the beside his office, and he came out of the office, and he was bulling like anybody would be. Suddenly 5.5 months later, suddenly you can drive. So he accused me of lying for the whole 6 months when we served together. That, oh, you told me you couldn't drive, and I said, at that time, sir, I couldn't drive, but for this job, I was told I had to be able to drive. So I've since learned to drive. And he just went away shaking his head. I don't believe her.
And too, there's this lovely story in that, but your father, he said, once you start driving, you'll be putting your hand over the passenger seat around, and you said you're actually doing that within a couple of reversing. And Owen, you spoke very fondly of Owen in Lebanon, when you're tripping Lebanon, and you also had to, the Blue Line, and then you had to set up another camp.
Yeah. Owen was a godsend. He was absolutely brilliant, because he had done, thank God, he had done what's known as a heavy weapons course within his own unit in Monaghan at the time. And so he, because I'd gone overseas to what's known as a company in the 87th Infantry Battalion. I served as the CQ of A Company, and A Company was a support element to the headquarters in the battalion, and they had lots of heavy weapons. I had never seen any of these weapons throughout my entire career, through no fault of my own. I'd never even seen one, so I didn't have a clue. But I had to pretend that I knew everything. But thankfully, Owen came to my rescue, and he was there all the time to protect me. And we had a lot of good banter, and we had a lot of good cracks together. Yeah, and we're still in contact, and yeah, he was very happy to be included in the book, and he was delighted. But he did say he's now a policeman in Northern Ireland.
Oh,
But he did, yeah, but he did say, don't put anything incriminating in the book, because I'm now a policeman. I said, oh no, okay.
And what I also admired, there was one, I don't know if it's an army captain, another situation where somebody entered your room. It was the young officer, and that was the time when your colleague was sleeping in the room with you, and you pushed him out of the room, and everybody wanted to know how he was stuck in the wired fence. But
Yes.
that's a story. But there was a senior officer really supported you there.
Yes, that's true. My commandant at that time, I was in a little small group called the NSC support group, logistics support group, and yeah, when we were very busy that morning, the morning after the night before, as to say that young officer tried to get into my bed when he was very drunk. We were very busy that morning, and as soon as we had done what we had to do, I went into him and I just sat down and burst into tears, because I said, once again, like this was fairly on in my career. This was in Eritrea, was in the early 2000s, and I just thought, is it ever going to change? I really have to stamp this out now. I know he didn't mean any harm, but yet again he broke the rules, and he needs to be, they give him some sort of punishment. So my commandant at that time, he was very, very, really surprised me and said, I'm having none of this, Molloy. Listen, we're going straight across the little corridor and to the commanding officer of the unit, the lieutenant colonel. And he was really forceful. No, I want that man in. I want him, punished, because again, you see, he had daughters, and he had sisters and a wife, and understood, that this isn't on. This was the early 2000s. A woman had been in the army nearly 30 years at that stage, and times have to change, and we need our respect. But yeah, but the officer, the colonel said, "Oh, look, Karina, I need this like a hole in the head." And we're getting on the plane in 6 hours. We're getting on the plane and we're going home in 6 hours. So what do you want to do? So we came to a compromise, and he brought in the young officer, and he apologized, and I accepted his apology. We wrote a non-disclosure, and we said we won't speak about it again, and that's it.
But
So
at least the commandant was there backing you up, and it goes. There is good men out there
yes,
in
yeah,
the world there is good men who are sometimes more, I would say, supportive of women and women's issues than some women. And so that was really, I was sort of really heartened by that. Another funny story, which I thought was, because I love the funny stories, and is I think it was in the Lebanon with Owen, and you were doing the changeover, but you had done the changeover for 2 weeks, and you were on the bus ready to go to the airport, and they come in and they pull you off. Karina, get
yeah,
off the bus. There was a gun missing.
there,
And
yeah.
I just thought that was hilarious. Your women's logic. You went in, sorted it out, no nonsense, and back on the bus.
Yeah, yeah. That was, yeah, I remember that like it was yesterday. I was so happy to be sitting on that bus, because that trip got extended by 3 weeks. And myself and Owen were sitting on the bus, and we were so happy to be getting home, because it was such a tough trip. And my 2IC came on the bus and called me off, and he told me what was going on when we got off the bus. So I let her roar back in. I said, "Owen, come out here, I need your help once more. Owen, come to the rescue." And we went in, and all the weapons, all the rifles were in this container, and it was extremely hot. So I'd never, during the 6 months, actually closed the door while we were in the container. We left the container door open all the time, because there was no air conditioning. So I was met with my counterpart, who I had handed over in the last 2 weeks, and he said, "Oh, Karina, we're missing a rifle. We're missing a rifle." Now, if I was thinking straight, I would have said, "Well, that's my problem. You signed for having the rifle 2 weeks ago. I signed all the weapons over to you. It's not my problem. Good luck now. I'm going home." But my own professionalism and my own integrity didn't allow me to do that. And I said, "Right." So I turned to Owen. I said, "Right, Owen." And I turned to my counterpart, "Right, the three of us stay in this room. We'll get it sorted. Everyone else, get out." I told senior officers to get out, because they were all, "Get out." And I had my back turned to Owen, and I said, "Owen," I said, "close that door."
Because they were
And Owen,
all arguing outside the door still, weren't
they were
they?
all arguing outside the door. "Where's this weapon? Where's this weapon? Did we really sign for it? Was it really there?" They're just trying to give blames to us, because we were going home. And I said, "Owen, close the door." And he says, "Are you out of your mind, Karina? We never closed the door. It's roasting." I said, "Yeah." I said, "I just can't stand the noise that was going outside, the arguing." I said, "Just close the door." So I had my back to Owen, and because I was talking to my counterparts, show me the paperwork. And as Owen closed the door, there was the rifle behind the door. And he just turned to me and put it in front of me. He says, "This is what we're looking for, Karina." And I said, "Yes, come on, we're getting back on the bus now. Let's get on this bus before they discover something else gone missing." So yeah, it's looking back on it now, it's very funny to write about, and it's funny to talk about. But that time, it's very, very serious
It's serious, yeah.
have a rifle, any weapon go missing.
Go
Yeah,
missing.
yeah,
And then you also had to deal with like many women. Men can just go to work and leave all the family issues to women, but you and your colleagues, you were women, you were daughters, and your mom, your father
yeah.
passed away, and you had to go up to the funeral, and you were still, your name was at the gate, if I'm rightly, your name was at the gate. And then another time, your mom wasn't well, and you had to keep, looking after your mom, being overseas, working in Dublin. And then you had also, I didn't realize this, and when you think about it, you also had to go in and get a hysterectomy.
Yes, yeah,
And then you were surgically induced menopause straight away once you have a hysterectomy.
Yeah,
And
because I had a total hysterectomy at the
yeah,
ovaries as well. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I spent 5 days in hospital. And my partner at that time, he's still my partner. He flew home from Bosnia to drive me home to Donegal and take care of me for a few days, and then fly back to his mission. And so because I couldn't get on the bus, there's no way I could, and I couldn't look after myself because I lived alone. I lived up 4 flights of stairs in an apartment on the top floor. There was no lifts, so you can't even step over a floorboard after the old-fashioned hysterectomy because your stomach is cut
yeah,
from hip to hip. So Mark came and took care of me, drove me home, and settled me in with my mum. So obviously, because she thankfully had recovered from her breast cancer at that stage and was fully fit and well. And my sister and mum took care of me. But so I got home on a Sunday, and the following morning, on the Monday morning, I got a phone call from my private storeman saying that the a senior NCO had put my name on the gate, and I have 3 charges pending for not following correct military procedure. And I was just in awe and frustrated and gasp. And Mark was furious, and his language was, well, I can't repeat what he said, but his attitude was, I wonder if it was a fellow male senior NCO that went in for prostate cancer or testicular cancer operation, would he have treated him the same? Because, as I said in the book, the charges were legitimate charges, but common sense should have prevailed. Because one of the charges is that you must stay in your home address when you're on sick leave. Now, my home address on file in the Defence Forces was my apartment in Dublin. And when I rang in to give my sick leave in the morning or Mark rang in and explained that she's now in Donegal, convalescing with her mother, that was the first charge that this senior NCO put against me. She's breaking the rules. She's not adhering to the rules, to military law. She's not staying in her home address. I couldn't stay in my home address because I would have been alone.
yeah,
Mark couldn't stay with me for the first 6 weeks. You can't even lift a kettle
no,
after hysterectomy. So, and I won't bother trying to explain the other 2 charges because they're a bit
no,
complicated. But they were legitimate.
yes,
But they were legitimate. He had the right to do that, as I explained in the book. But he should have, common sense should have gone in there. So
sense.
it
And
just,
women's health is different than men's health, just like
yes,
women's feet and women's bodies are different than men's, you know?
yeah. But it just shows the vindictiveness and the gender discrimination
Yes,
that he had against me. It was just unbelievable. So it took the female colonel doctor that was taking care of me. She rang with one phone call. She outranked him, thankfully, and told him to cop on and get rid of those charges.
thank
But
God. Yeah, but the harassment, you didn't need the harassment.
no, I didn't need that extra pressure.
No, like
No.
what? A hysterectomy is a massive invasive surgery.
Yeah.
And, you can't walk back then, with the old, as you said, the old hysterectomy, you weren't even allowed, as you said. You literally were forbidden medically to lift a kettle. It was too
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah.
And then you left the army in 2012, am I correct?
Yes. Yes.
Retired after 31 years of protecting our nation, defending our nation and protecting us, the citizens of Ireland, representing us as what I would say Ireland's best ambassadors to Ireland is our defence forces. You're known around the world of being such great ambassadors to Ireland, representing us with such pride. And you decided to leave the Defence Forces in 2012. How was that for you? What was it like leaving a military environment and then becoming a civilian?
Yeah. Yeah. It was strange. I sort of felt that I was pushed out, but But as Mark said, well, before that, you were cycling on your bike, crying, going into work. So it's time to leave when you're crying, going into work. And I understood his logic there. But it's also very strange, and it's the same for men. You know, once you leave an institution, you're totally institutionalized. And as I said, like for 30 years, I didn't have to think of what am I going to wear to work today. Like every woman has a struggle. Oh my God, my blouse isn't washed, and I've torn my tights and I can't wear them. And I never had to think or blink or anything for 30 years for that. As what shall I wear tomorrow morning? Like, you know, so I was totally. I have to admit, yeah, I struggled badly. But I had something in place. I struggled with not getting up in the morning and said, shit, what am I going to do all day now? But for the first 3 months after I left, I did a gourmet cookery course because I never learned to cook. So, and that was quite regimented. So I had to be in class at 9 o'clock. We finished at 4, and it was very much regimental. So that brought me through to try and become as they say, a civvy. But when all that left, and when I went home to my mother and I took her away on holidays, myself and Mark took her away on holidays. I left in February, took her holidays in May, and then come June, I was at home with Mum, and she had gone through her second cancer at that stage. And I realized, now what do I do? Like, I was just flabbergasted. I just didn't know what to do with the rest of my life. And it took a good 9 months to come to terms with that. I no longer have my suit of armor on, and I got very depressed, and everything that happened to me came rushing back because I never dealt with it because I had still in the fight. My adrenaline was still there, but once I left, I had to go into counselling and try and deal with it. And I dealt with it, so I thought, and then moved back to Dublin then for 2 years and done a certificate, a level 6 in horticulture. And then unfortunately Mum got very sick again, and then I moved home to take care of her. And then the wonderful woman of honor came on board then.
Tell us about that. How did the woman of honor come to play? Because that is powerful, and I think it's going to go down in Irish history.
Yeah,
go forward, the woman of honor.
Yeah, well, for me, it all stemmed from a guy called Anthony O'Brien. He was brave enough to put up on the veterans pages on Facebook. Anybody that has been sexually harassed or abused, come contact me and tell me your story, because I'm compiling stories and I'm bringing them to the Department of Defense. So I eventually plucked up the courage and phoned him, and then he put me in touch with another female, retired female officer, and she helped me put in, as I said in the book, put in my protective disclosure. And then while I was doing that, lots of other things were happening in the background. Serendipity was happening, and 3 or 4 other female officers had been talking to each other. And we eventually, the girl that contacted me through Anthony, was in contact with the other girl who initially set up the Woman of Honor. And she asked that girl, would Karina be a good fit for this group? And, would she be willing to come ahead and tell her story? And so that's how it happened. That girl got in touch with that girl, and that girl got in touch with me through Anto. And we eventually, then after a few Zoom calls, we eventually came up with the name, the Woman of Honor. And we got together. And the initial founder of the Woman of Honor, she knew Katie Hannon from a previous meeting, and then thank God Katie Hannon got permission to come on board and do the documentary, and the rest is history.
Even in today's society, you as female soldiers in your own professional role and career, you're brave and courageous, but to be to do and speak out and say what you said and go through the rigmarole of saying what happened within the experiences and sexual abuse and sexism within the Defence Forces is even braver and more courageous. And it's also vulnerable because you're putting yourself out there to be vulnerable and to be judged. Because regardless of what we say, and I would say this, women judge women harder than what
Yeah.
men do. That must have been an emotional turmoil as well, and a roller coaster, reliving those experiences, and as well when you now were a civilian.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it was very. Yeah, I had already done my protected disclosures by the time Katie Hannon came to interview me, so I was fairly okay. But as soon as she put the microphone in front of me, I found it very difficult. It was great to type the protected disclosure. It was fine typing, but to actually talk about it and to
Verbalize it, yeah.
actually verbalize it was a whole different story. And yeah, but I never thought that there would be a negative reaction from certain females. That we all struggled with that. But then on hindsight, as I explained in the book, they they hadn't dealt with it and they didn't want to be reminded of it. So they were in their own struggles, in their own struggling world. And some of them had kept it from their husbands and their boyfriends. And then when all
Yeah.
this was revealed, then they had to struggle and to 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 explain what happened and if anything happened to them, because they like me buried it and hid it throughout their entire career, and then to suddenly hear it on the radio. We had so many wonderful young girls contacting us saying, "Oh, you triggered this, and this happened to me, and that happened to me," and it was so sad to read all their experiences, and they never had a voice. But now we've given them the voice, which is great.
Yeah.
Now they've become more powerful and able to speak up and say, no, this is wrong, we're not doing this, we're not
Yes.
having it happening anymore. So it's great.
The Women of Honor, you also you took it to the Minister Simon Coveney, and you've asked for the 4 A's. Tell us about the 4 A's.
Yes, I came up with the 4 A's. Well, I initially came up with the first 2 A's before I met the civil servant in relation to my protected disclosure, because Mark grilled me and said, well, what do you want from this meeting? So I explained it in more detail in the book. So I said, well, I want an acknowledgement that this happened. I want the government, the Department of Defence to acknowledge this happened, and an apology. And so that was the first 2 A's. And then as we went on, we realized that we were going to go and get to meet the minister and the General Secretary of Defence, Jackie McCrum. We said, right, we better come up with what do we ultimately want? What's our end game? And our end game was to get action and accountability. So that's where the 4 A's came from. So so we've got our acknowledgement. We got a sort of an apology. We're still waiting for a public apology. We've got some action. The Defence Forces have put into place a lot of new procedures and a lot of protection, but still not enough. But we certainly haven't got accountability, because because there's still men serving that were found guilty of sexual harassment and sexual assault, and they're still serving, and they shouldn't be served. So we want accountability, and our accountability is the same the accountability that was given by the Canadian Air Force. Canadian Air Force fired two of their chief of staffs, fired them because they allowed rape and harassment and assault to happen under their watch. So they were dismissed. So that's the kind of accountability we want. And the only way we're going to get that is by statutory inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still waiting for the IRG report to be published, to be released.
And what we need as a society, because the Irish Defence Forces, as I've said, you defend our nation and you protect our citizens. But therefore, it's up to the Irish citizens to protect the men and women in our defence forces and speak up.
Yeah.
And stand up for the women in our defence forces and say, we as citizens are not going to allow or stand for our women to be sexually harassed or bullied or intimidated within our defence forces.
Yes. Yes, it's up to the Minister of Defence as an employer to protect his own employees, men and females.
But
And
it's up
this,
to us women as well to support you, the women of honour, and the women of our defence forces, and our
yes,
Garda Síochána as well, to say,
yeah,
no, we are not, because I have this, there's so much of this fake feminism that came out of the Harvey Weinstein Hollywood Me Too movement, and which was organized by Hollywood, and this women supporting women. But in my experience and my personal opinion, women don't support women the way we should.
yeah. No, I don't know who said it. I think it was an American senator. But her saying is that there's a special place in hell for women who don't support women.
I like that. I
So,
like that.
so because I got that from some woman. They said, "Oh, your book is written on 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 using the pain of other women." Like I got accused of using other women's pain, but I said no. I said I didn't divulge
No.
anybody else's pain but my own. I
Yeah.
bared my own soul in that book. But it does dishearten me to say that unfortunately within the defence forces that other women are destroying other women, and they're bullying and harassing other women. And for me, it's very hard to deal with. But unfortunately, it happens in every society.
Every
Women,
society.
every society.
Every. Yeah. And until we stop that as women,
Yes.
women will always be a second-class citizen. Women there will always be sexism, rape, and bullying and intimidation, and sexist comments as well. Karina Molloy, this is an amazing book. It is a page turner. It is a book you can't put down, and it is a must read for the whole nation, and it should be in every household in Ireland. Supporting a woman who has represented Ireland for 31 years, sworn oath to defend her nation and protect us, the citizens of Ireland.
Thank you very much, Roisin, for having me, and thank you for all those kind words and your constant support. Thanks.